It was a bright, busy morning at the downtown bank. People were lined up, waiting patiently for their turn, some checking their phones, others quietly chatting. The tellers were busy, processing deposits and withdrawals, completely unaware that today, something unusual was about to happen. Suddenly, the front doors swung open. All heads turned. Chuck Norris walked in, carrying a large, mysterious sack over his shoulder. His expression was calm, almost casual, as if he were entering his own home. There was something about the way he moved, steady, deliberate, confident, that immediately drew the attention of everyone in the bank. The bank staff exchanged glances. "Who's this guy?" whispered one teller. Another chuckled nervously. A few customers nudged each other, pointing discreetly at Chuck and whispering under their breath. The sack he carried looked heavy, but Chuck made it seem effortless, swinging it over his shoulder without a hint of strain. At the counter, the main banker noticed him. He was a confident man, used to being in control, and he quickly sized up Chuck. The banker laughed, thinking it was just some eccentric customer with a funny prop. "What is this? Some kind of joke," he muttered, loud enough for a few nearby customers to hear. Chuck didn't respond. He simply walked toward the center of the bank, placing the sack gently on the floor, his eyes locked on the banker. People began to notice the tension. The banker laughed louder, stepping closer. "Sir, is that yours? What are you planning to do with that?" he said, smirking. Chuck still didn't speak. He simply tilted his head, letting the silence stretch. The atmosphere in the bank began to shift. Where there was once casual laughter, now there was unease. Everyone felt it, the calm before a storm. The customers leaned forward slightly, curiosity piqued. What was in that sack? And why was Chuck Norris so calm, so steady, in a room full of people who were suddenly on edge? Everyone in the bank had no idea. What Chuck had in that sack would change everything in just a few moments. The bank was buzzing as usual, until Chuck Norris's calm, deliberate entrance began to change the energy in the room. The mysterious sack he carried seemed heavier than it looked, yet he walked as if it weighed nothing at all. Customers and staff whispered among themselves, glancing nervously at him. Some pulled out their phones, not daring to approach but wanting to capture the moment. The main banker, a man in a sharp suit and polished shoes, noticed Chuck immediately. He was a man used to authority, confident that no one could intimidate him in his domain. When he saw Chuck place the sack down gently on the floor, he couldn't help but laugh. "Ha! What is this? Some kind of joke," he said loudly, chuckling as if the absurdity of the scene was hilarious. Chuck didn't answer. He simply stood still, eyes fixed on the banker. His silence was heavy, almost commanding, and it made the laughter in the room falter slightly. But the banker wasn't deterred. In fact, he laughed even louder. "Look at this guy. Carrying a bag around like he owns the place. What's in there? Your lunch. Spare socks." Customers exchanged glances. Some were already leaning closer, cameras recording, curious. The tension was rising without anyone fully realizing why. Chuck's calm presence contrasted sharply with the banker's arrogance. The air seemed to vibrate with unspoken tension. "Sir," the banker continued, stepping closer to Chuck, pointing at the sack. "You can't just walk in here with that thing. This is a bank, not some circus." He laughed again, clearly enjoying himself. "Are you trying to make a statement or something?" Chuck finally spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I'm here to do what needs to be done." There was no threat in his words, only certainty, and it sent a ripple through the room. The banker's smile wavered for a moment, but he shook it off and leaned back behind his counter, arms crossed. The teller next to him whispered nervously, Who is he?" The banker waved them off. "Just ignore him. He's probably one of those weird guys." But the customers couldn't ignore it. Phones were recording, cameras were pointing subtly from every angle. People were already imagining stories they would later tell. The man with the sack, standing silently, staring down a banker who laughs at him. Chuck's posture didn't change. He stood there, calm and patient, waiting for the banker to speak again. The banker, however, couldn't resist the urge to mock him further. "Seriously, man, what do you think you're doing? Do you want me to call security? Maybe we should escort you out before you cause trouble." He laughed, thinking it was all just a joke. Chuck's eyes narrowed slightly, but still, he said nothing. He didn't need to argue or threaten. The silence itself was growing louder than any words the banker could say. Customers started whispering among themselves. One of them finally broke the silence. "I don't know who he is, but I wouldn't want to be on the banker's side right now." The banker, oblivious, barked, "Hey! Don't talk unless spoken to." Chuck tilted his head slightly and looked around the room. The tension was thick. He was calm, but the energy he radiated was enough to make people's hearts race. The banker, still mocking, walked closer to the sack. "Come on, man, let's see what's in there. Maybe it's just money. A prop. Some kind of joke." At that moment, the bank's energy shifted. People leaned in, subtle but curious. Phones raised higher. Whispering turned into murmurs. "What's in the sack? Is he some kind of celebrity? Who even is he? If you were watching this live, where would you be? Type your city or country in the comments and let us know where this story is reaching you." The banker smirked, clearly proud of himself. He had the upper hand, or so he thought. "You think you can just come in here and, whatever you're planning, and I'll be impressed? Ha! You're wasting your time." Chuck's eyes flicked to the banker, steady, unwavering. There was no fear, no intimidation, just pure focus. The crowd around them felt it. Some started to lean closer, sensing that something was about to happen. The banker laughed again, louder this time, and added mockingly, "Maybe you're here to show off some kind of martial arts trick. Go ahead, show us, mister." He paused, trying to guess Chuck's identity. "Mister. Funny sack guy." Chuck didn't answer. He simply adjusted his grip on the sack slightly, and the air seemed to thicken even more. Everyone in the room could feel the tension. The banker's laughter, once bold and mocking, started to waver ever so slightly. People were watching, holding their breath, phones recording every second. The stage was set. The banker believed he was in control, the customers were buzzing with curiosity, and Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris was simply waiting, calm as ever, for the right moment to make the banker regret every mocking word he had just said. The bank was quiet now, but not in a comfortable way. The hum of computers and the soft chatter of customers felt distant, overshadowed by the tension that had gripped the room. Chuck Norris stood beside the sack, his posture calm, shoulders squared, and gaze steady. Every person in the bank could feel the intensity radiating from him. It was the kind of presence that made even the boldest feel small, but no one dared speak up, except for the banker. The banker straightened, trying to regain control. "All right, let's see what you've got in that sack," he said, smirking. "Or maybe you think this is some kind of magic trick. I suggest you leave before anyone gets nervous." His laugh was strained, a little forced this time, as though he could sense that the calm man in front of him was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. Chuck's hands rested lightly on the sack. He didn't need to raise his voice, he didn't need to threaten. His very presence was enough to command attention. Slowly, he spoke, his voice low, calm, and deliberate. "I am not here to fight. I am here to ensure things are done properly." The banker scoffed, folding his arms. "Properly? In a bank? You? With a sack?" He chuckled again, though this time the laugh didn't quite reach his eyes. He took a step closer, clearly testing the waters, trying to intimidate Chuck. "Do you even know who I am? I make the rules here." Chuck didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just looked at the banker, unwavering, letting the silence stretch between them. The tension was so thick that you could almost cut it with a knife. Customers leaned forward in their seats, some clutching their phones, ready to record the moment. One brash customer finally whispered, "Is that Chuck Norris?" The banker spun around. "Who said that?" he barked, clearly irritated. "Don't start nonsense in my bank." Chuck's lips twitched in the hint of a smile, though it was subtle, almost imperceptible. The banker, sensing that he was losing control, tried another tactic. He leaned toward Chuck and said, "You think a quiet stare is going to intimidate me? You think a sack makes you special? You're wasting your time, man." The calm, collected aura surrounding Chuck only grew stronger. His silence spoke louder than any words. The banker felt it, the room seemed smaller, tighter, more focused. He tried to laugh, but it came out nervous. Sweat formed at his temple. The customers noticed, whispering to each other. A small child pointed at the sack, curiosity innocent but honest. "What's inside?" the child asked, looking at Chuck with wide eyes. The banker waved the child away, trying to maintain authority. "Kid, don't bother asking questions. This isn't a playground." His voice cracked slightly, betraying his unease. Chuck finally shifted his stance, adjusting the sack slightly. He didn't lift it or threaten anyone. He didn't even raise his voice. And yet, the room collectively held its breath. It was as though the calmest man alive had the power to stop everything, and maybe even change the course of what was about to happen. If you were in the bank right now, what would you do? Would you confront the banker, follow Chuck, or stay hidden? Comment below. The banker, realizing that the calm man before him wasn't reacting to provocation, tried one last attempt to assert control. "Listen, you better tell me what that sack is before I call security." Chuck looked around at the gathering crowd, then back at the banker. His gaze was unyielding. "It's not about the sack," he said, voice still low, measured. "It's about respect. And that is something you should understand before it's too late." A murmur ran through the crowd. Customers exchanged uneasy glances. Phones raised higher. Some whispered, "Who is this guy?" Others murmured, "He's not joking." The banker's confidence began to crack. The laughter that had echoed through the room earlier was gone. All that remained was a sense of unease, an awareness that he had underestimated this quiet, unassuming man standing beside a simple sack. Chuck remained calm, patient, and unthreatening. But in that calm was power. In that patience was authority. And the banker, for the first time, realized that mocking him so far might have been a grave mistake. The tension was at its peak. Every second felt heavier than the last. The stage was set for a revelation that no one in that bank, especially the arrogant banker, would forget. The tension in the bank was palpable. Customers and staff alike could feel it, the calm, unyielding presence of Chuck Norris standing beside his mysterious sack, and the banker, once so confident, now shifting uneasily behind the counter. Every movement, every blink, seemed amplified in the heavy air. Some customers whispered, nudging one another. "Do you know who that is?" one woman murmured. "I think I've seen him on TV. That's Chuck Norris, isn't it?" The word spread like wildfire. A young man with a phone leaned over to his friend, whispering, "It is him, that's Chuck Norris. The guy's a legend." The banker, busy trying to regain control, heard snippets of the murmurs. He paused, frowning. "What are you talking about?" he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. His bravado was fading under the intense, quiet scrutiny of the man standing before him. Chuck, as always, didn't need to respond. His presence alone made it clear he was aware of the whispers, yet he remained calm. He didn't brag. He didn't flaunt his identity. Instead, he allowed the recognition to ripple through the room organically. One bystander, more confident than the rest, whispered loudly enough for nearby people to hear, "That's Chuck Norris, martial artist, movie star, legend." A collective murmur rose among the crowd. Phones were now raised, recording every second. Some people even approached, hoping to catch a better glimpse, while others stepped back, sensing the gravity of the moment. The banker, however, still hadn't fully realized who he was dealing with. He tried to hide it, puffing his chest. "Legend or not," he said, forcing a laugh, "this is a bank. Rules apply to everyone. You can't just show up and..." But the words faltered. Chuck's calm, unwavering stare met the banker's eyes. For the first time, the banker felt a real edge of fear, a crack in his previously unshakable confidence. He could feel the eyes of every person in the room on him, silently judging his arrogance. Another bystander, a middle-aged man who had seen Chuck in martial arts documentaries years ago, whispered excitedly, "Do you see how calm he is? That's Chuck Norris for you. Doesn't even need to raise his voice." Customers now shifted in their seats. The murmur turned into a buzz of whispers and speculation. "He doesn't even look scared," someone said. "And the banker, he's sweating." The banker's forced smile faltered. He realized the mistake he had made by laughing at Chuck's entrance and mocking the sack. He could see now that everyone in the bank was watching him, the once confident man now under pressure, his authority slowly slipping away. Chuck remained still, giving nothing away, but his presence alone was enough. The whispers continued. Martial artist, action star. Legendary fighter. Doesn't even need to touch anyone to command respect. Some of the braver customers began quietly recording videos, capturing the banker's increasingly anxious expressions alongside Chuck's unshakable calm. The dynamic had completely shifted. The banker, who thought he was in control just minutes ago, now felt like a child under the gaze of someone far more powerful, though that power remained restrained and dignified. Chuck shifted slightly, adjusting the sack, drawing just enough attention to it without revealing its contents. The movement was subtle, but everyone noticed. The suspense grew. What could be inside? And what would he do next? The banker attempted one more bluff, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Listen, no one is supposed to, disrupt the bank. You can't just, he trailed off, words failing him as his nervous glance darted toward the whispers spreading through the crowd. The customers were now fully invested. Phones raised, murmurs rising into low chatter. Everyone had realized they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for years. The whispers turned into soft exclamations. Chuck Norris, in a bank. Calm, but so intense. Don't mess with him. Chuck's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the banker's growing panic. The silence between them became heavier, more loaded. Every second that passed felt like a lifetime. If you were standing in that bank and realized who was in front of you, what would you do? Type your reaction in the comments below. The banker's eyes flicked nervously around the room. The customers were silently cheering Chuck with their eyes, their whispers acting as a chorus of silent support. He realized, with dawning horror, that the entire room now knew he had underestimated the man before him. Chuck, as always, remained silent. He didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there, patient, calm, and ready. The anticipation in the room grew unbearably thick. The moment of reckoning, the moment the banker would truly regret mocking Chuck Norris, was drawing ever closer. The atmosphere in the bank had shifted completely. The customers' whispers had grown louder, phones were raised high, and the once confident banker was visibly unsettled. His forced smile had disappeared, replaced by a nervous twitch and a frown that deepened with every passing second. He had laughed at Chuck Norris when he first walked in, mocking the mysterious sack. Now, that laughter seemed almost foolish in the tense air. Chuck remained calm, standing beside the sack as if nothing had changed, yet his presence alone was enough to make the banker question every decision he had made in the last few minutes. He didn't rush forward, he didn't raise his voice, and he didn't threaten anyone. But his eyes, steady, piercing, unwavering, held a power that no words could convey. The banker tried again, fumbling to regain control. Listen, sir. You can't just come in here and, this is a bank, rules apply, you. He stopped mid-sentence, realizing that words wouldn't save him now. The confidence he had relied on all these years was crumbling in the face of someone who didn't need to argue to command respect. Chuck's calm energy dominated the room, and the banker felt it like a physical weight pressing down on him. Then Chuck spoke, finally breaking the silence. His voice was low, measured, and steady, but it carried the weight of undeniable authority. Respect is earned through action, not arrogance. You cannot mock or belittle others and expect the world to ignore it. The banker's jaw tightened. He tried to interrupt, but his voice faltered. I was just joking. Nothing serious. Chuck didn't respond to the excuse. He simply nodded slightly, allowing the words to hang in the air. Customers leaned in, captivated. Some whispered in disbelief, did he just lecture the banker? That's Chuck Norris, he doesn't even need to fight. Chuck continued, his gaze sweeping the room as if addressing not only the banker but everyone present. When you judge someone by appearances, when you mock without knowing the truth, you show weakness, not strength. True power lies in humility, calm, and fairness. The banker swallowed hard. The heat from embarrassment rose in his face. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He realized that he had underestimated not just Chuck Norris, but the silent authority and integrity he carried. Every mocking word he had spoken now felt like a mistake that the entire bank could witness. A customer, emboldened by Chuck's calm, whispered loudly enough for others to hear, he's right. The banker should be careful. The banker, growing desperate, tried a final display of authority. I don't know who you think you are. You can't just. Chuck's eyes locked onto him. One steady, unwavering stare. No words. The banker's words died in his throat. The crowd felt the intensity. Phones captured the moment, the arrogant banker silenced by the mere presence of a man who had never needed to prove himself through intimidation. Chuck took a slow step closer to the sack. He didn't grab it. He didn't threaten anyone. He merely adjusted it, drawing subtle attention. It was a reminder that he controlled the situation without raising a fist, without shouting, a masterclass in power through calmness. The banker's mockery had vanished completely. Every person in the bank could see it now, he was not in control. His arrogance, his laughter, his attempts to belittle Chuck, all were crumbling before the sheer quiet authority of a man who commanded respect without demanding it. Have you ever seen someone completely humble but completely commanding at the same time? Comment below how you would react if you were the banker. Chuck's calmness only magnified the banker's panic. Customers leaned forward, whispering to each other. Phones were recording every second. It was clear to everyone that the banker had misjudged not only Chuck's identity but the consequences of arrogance and disrespect. Finally, Chuck's hand rested lightly on the sack. He looked at the banker, not with anger, not with gloating, but with quiet authority. Mockery, arrogance, and disrespect are easy. Strength is shown through patience, calm, and fairness. You have a choice, acknowledge it now, or continue down a path of regret. The banker's face drained of color. He realized the weight of his mistake. His confidence was gone, replaced by shame, and every customer in the bank could see it. Chuck's words, calm and deliberate, had completely reversed the power dynamic. The crowd shifted, sensing the turning point. The banker's smug demeanor had collapsed, and in its place stood a man humbled by the presence of someone who embodied quiet strength and moral authority. Chuck Norris didn't need to throw a punch. He didn't need to lift the sack or threaten. The banker's regret, the shift in the crowd's energy, and the silent awe of everyone present was proof enough. Chuck had already won, simply by standing there with dignity, calm, and quiet authority. The stage was now set for the ultimate reveal, where Chuck's identity and the contents of the sack would shock the banker and everyone else in the bank. The bank was electric with tension. Every customer, every teller, even those who had been casually minding their own business, was now fully focused on Chuck Norris and the mysterious sack at his side. The banker's forced confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Sweat dotted his brow, and his hands fidgeted nervously. He realized, painfully, that he had underestimated the calm, quiet authority of the man before him. Chuck's gaze swept the room once more. He didn't speak yet. He didn't need to. Every eye in the bank followed him, waiting. The air was thick with anticipation. The whispers from the crowd had grown louder, more urgent. Is that really him? Chuck Norris, in person? What's in that sack? Then, in a simple but deliberate motion, Chuck slowly knelt beside the sack. He lifted it just enough for the top to peek open. The crowd leaned forward in unison, phones raised, capturing the moment. What everyone saw made them gasp. Inside the sack were stacks of envelopes, organized neatly, labeled clearly, and filled with thousands of dollars. It wasn't just cash. It was an act of extraordinary generosity. Chuck Norris had not come to cause trouble, intimidate, or seek revenge. He had come to quietly resolve a mistake the banker had made with one of his customers earlier, and to ensure the right people were helped. The banker's jaw dropped. He took a step back, finally realizing the enormity of the situation. Every mocking word he had spoken, every laugh at Chuck's entrance, every sneer directed at the man before him, it all now felt utterly foolish. Chuck stood, calm as ever, his eyes still locked on the banker. This, he said, voice measured and firm, is how respect is shown. Not through arrogance. Not through mockery. But through action that helps others and preserves dignity. The crowd erupted in whispers and murmurs of awe. Customers who had been recording the entire event began speaking openly, marveling at Chuck's quiet power and moral authority. Some applauded, others simply stared, mouths open in disbelief. The banker's face had turned red, not with anger, but with shame. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. I misjudged you. I apologize, he stammered. The apology sounded weak compared to the magnitude of the situation, but it was sincere. Chuck nodded once, simply acknowledging it. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't make the banker feel worse than he already did. Instead, he gave a subtle nod to the customers, who had now formed a semicircle around him, silently cheering his composure and integrity. If you witnessed this, what would be your reaction to Chuck Norris handling the situation with such calm and authority? Comment below. One of the tellers, finally recognizing the full picture, whispered to a colleague, "I can't believe it, that's Chuck Norris. All this time, I thought it was just another customer." The banker overheard and felt an even deeper wave of embarrassment. He had mocked a legend, unknowingly, in front of dozens of witnesses. Chuck then picked up the sack again, now lightly, effortlessly, and placed it back on the counter. "Let this be a lesson," he said calmly, addressing everyone in the room. "Respect everyone, judge no one by appearances, and act with integrity. That is the true measure of strength." The customers erupted into quiet applause. Some raised their phones high, capturing the final moments. Others whispered in amazement. The banker stood frozen, realizing that his humiliation had become a lesson not only for himself but for everyone else present. Chuck gave one last, calm look at the banker before turning and walking toward the exit. Each step was deliberate, confident, and dignified. The banker watched him leave, utterly defeated but enlightened. The room was silent for a beat, then slowly, murmurs and applause filled the space as everyone began to process what had just happened. The story of Chuck Norris and the mysterious sack would not be forgotten. Customers would tell their friends, videos would circulate online, and the lesson of respect, humility, and quiet authority would reach far beyond that bank. The banker, still recovering, muttered under his breath, I should have treated him differently, but it was too late. The moment had passed, and Chuck Norris had left an unforgettable impression. The moral was clear: true power is quiet, humility is commanding, and arrogance is always exposed in the presence of integrity. The bank had slowly returned to normal, but the atmosphere was far from ordinary. Every customer who had witnessed the encounter with Chuck Norris felt the weight of what had just transpired. Phones were still recording, whispers filled the air, and staff exchanged glances of disbelief. The story of a man who had entered calmly, carried a mysterious sack, and silenced an arrogant banker without raising a hand or a voice had just unfolded before their eyes. Videos shot by customers and staff immediately started circulating online. Within hours, clips of Chuck standing beside the sack, calmly confronting the banker, and delivering his powerful words about respect and humility went viral. Social media lit up with hashtags like #ChuckNorris, #respect, #legend, and #bankergetslesson. Millions of people from around the world shared, commented, and debated what had happened, turning the simple bank incident into a global phenomenon. The banker, meanwhile, had retreated to his office, still pale and shaken. He replayed every second of the encounter in his mind. The laughter he had shared earlier, the mocking words he had thrown at Chuck, and the pride he had felt, now all seemed like foolish mistakes. Chuck's calm authority and moral clarity had left him exposed, humbled in front of dozens of witnesses, and the footage circulating online only amplified his embarrassment. Chuck Norris, on the other hand, had left the bank quietly, as he had entered. No fanfare, no unnecessary attention, just dignity and humility. Yet the impact of his actions was far-reaching. People praised him not for theatrics or intimidation, but for standing by his principles, demonstrating that real strength lies in calmness, fairness, and respect. The customers who had witnessed the event firsthand were quick to share their reactions online. Comments poured in. That banker had no idea who he was messing with. Chuck Norris doesn't need to fight, his presence is enough. This is the definition of calm authority. Respect to the legend. Even those who had only seen the videos were captivated by the story. People across different countries and cities began sharing their own experiences with arrogance and humility, relating to the lesson Chuck had demonstrated. The story inspired countless viewers to reflect on their own behavior, both in public spaces and personal interactions. In the bank, Chuck's impact lingered. The tellers spoke in hushed tones about what had just happened. Customers continued sharing the story with friends and family. The banker, who had once commanded authority in the room, was now learning the hard way that true respect is earned, not demanded. He realized that humility, fairness, and integrity were far more powerful than sarcasm, mockery, or false confidence. If you believe no one should be judged by appearances, if you respect calm authority and integrity, type respect in the comments below. Share your city and country too, and let the world know where you're watching from. The incident became more than just a viral story. It turned into a lesson in public behavior, social responsibility, and the power of dignity. Teachers used it as an example for students. Leaders shared it in meetings. And millions online cited it as a reminder that arrogance is fleeting, but quiet confidence and moral strength leave a lasting mark. Chuck Norris had entered a bank carrying a simple sack. He had faced mockery, disbelief, and arrogance, yet he left behind a story that would be remembered for years. He had shown that true power doesn't require a fight, it requires integrity, calm, and the courage to do what is right. As the videos continued to circulate, one thing became abundantly clear: people didn't just admire Chuck Norris for his legendary skills, they respected him for his character. And in a world often obsessed with spectacle, that quiet demonstration of authority and humility resonated more than any headline could. The banker, now humbled, vowed to change his ways, and the customers carried with them a story they would never forget. Chuck Norris had come, shown the lesson, and left quietly, but the ripple effect of that day would spread worldwide, inspiring respect, humility, and integrity wherever the story reached. The sack, the calm stare, the lesson, it was all a reminder: true power is measured by how you treat others, not by how loudly you assert yourself.